here. Series. Today we're going to go into wiring, a bit of basic redstone, and how to wire your cannon. So let's get started. There is two different things we're going to talk about when talking about redstone wiring: delay and pulse length. Delay, I'm pretty sure everyone is already very familiar with. It's measured in ticks. As you know, a repeater is 1 tick. It is important here to specify that this is a redstone tick. I'm going to explain why in a second here. As you know, a normal repeater can go from 1 to 4 redstone ticks, and depending on how many ticks you set, that is how long it will take for the signal to pass through it. The second thing, which is very important when talking about redstone wiring, is pulse length. You might already notice, but for example, a stone button lasts shorter than a wooden button, and the signal that comes out of an observer lasts even shorter. This is what we call pulse length, or how long a redstone signal stays enabled before it turns off again. And it's also a very important concept in cannoning. Before we talk about further applications of this, I'm going to explain the concept of redstone ticks really quick. As you're probably already familiar with the normal redstone tick, that is the length of one repeater. This is 1/10 of a second. So if you have 10 redstone ticks, it will take 1 second for the signal. Now, Minecraft doesn't actually calculate whatever is happening only 10 times per second. It calculates this 20 times per second to make the gameplay smoother. Now, every 20th of a second, Minecraft calculates the next tick and calculates everything that happens in a game within that time frame. This is what we call a game tick. So the only thing that's important to take away from this is that a game tick is half a redstone tick. There's 20 game ticks in a second, but only 10 redstone ticks. So it's very important to specify if you're talking about game ticks or redstone ticks. Usually, game ticks are shortened with GT, while redstone ticks are shortened with RT. This is a very important difference, and 1 game tick is equal to half a redstone tick. The second thing you need to know is that while with normal repeaters you cannot make a game tick delay, you can't make half a redstone tick of delay, you can have a repeater start half a redstone tick later. I'm going to demonstrate what I mean by this really quickly. So this repeater is going to start at 1. This repeater is going to start at 2 redstone ticks. 1, 2. But we can also achieve something in between, 1.5 redstone ticks. And the way we do this is by using a game tick generator. That's what we call a circuit that generates that 0.5 redstone tick delay. As you can see now, if you watch very carefully, this repeater actually enables in between these two repeaters, even though here we have 1, 2 ticks, and here we have 1, 2, 3 ticks. So there's a 0.5 tick difference here. This enables a 2.5 redstone ticks, or 5 game ticks. It's also important to note that further than that, there is no smaller increment. The game tick is the smallest unit of time in Minecraft, and nothing can take shorter than 1 game tick. Next, we're going to look at the different delay circuits. So the basic delay of 1 redstone tick can be found in pretty much anything: pistons, comparators, repeaters, redstone torches, and observers all have one redstone tick of delay. However, we need to be careful of how we combine these two. For example, a piston with a redstone block on top will be one tick of delay, as the redstone block provides power immediately. But the piston with an observer on top will be two redstone ticks of delay, as on the first redstone tick the piston extends, and on the second redstone tick the observer updates and sends a signal, which also takes one redstone tick. So if you combine these two, the delay adds up. Then we have the 2.5 redstone ticks. Here, this is what we call a game tick generator, as it creates 2.5 redstone ticks or 5 game ticks of difference. The way you do this is by chaining two pistons, since for some reason, when a piston gets powered by another piston, it takes an extra game tick to extend. Then, obviously, we have the 3-tick repeater, and we can also make the same game tick generator on 3.5 ticks using an observer on the second piston. As long as we chain two pistons, this game tick will be added in between those two pistons. So you can see it this way. This first piston does a redstone tick, and because it is directly connected to another piston, there is a game tick added in between. The second piston also does a redstone tick, so you get 2.5 redstone ticks or 5 game ticks. Same here, but you also have the observer at the end, which adds another tick. Now we're also going to talk about the order of entities, or order in general. This is a very important concept, since, for example, if you want to tunnel or nuke, which I'm going to explain in a later video, you need to control what TNT explodes first, even if they explode in the same tick. Since Minecraft is a game, everything is calculated linearly. The TNT can't actually explode at once. So every tick, every 20th of a second, Minecraft goes through all the TNT and sees which one will explode, and then calculates all of the explosions. Obviously, the first one to get calculated is the one that got spawned in first. So if I spawn these two TNT, and this one came before this one, and this one will also explode first. The way we can control this is by using Redstone Order, and this is the order here. So first calculated is a redstone torch, then a repeater, then a comparator, then pistons, then observers, and here I put a door to signify bot powering. If something is bot powered, it will get calculated last. So this is also the order in which these things got added into the game, which is quite interesting. But so the way you control when something is spawned in is quite simple. For example, these both have a 1 redstone tick delay, so the TNT will explode at the same time. As you can see. But what you will notice is that this TNT explodes over here, 1 block to the side. And why is that? Because while they explode at the same time, in that tick, this TNT is calculated first because it uses the repeater, and this one is calculated after because it uses the comparator. So that means that this TNT here explodes, then this TNT here moves and explodes. Since this TNT already has the velocity from this explosion applied to it, it's gonna explode over here instead. And this is 100% consistent. It's always going to be this way. Now if we switch these around, you will also see it switches. Note that there's no real delay in between these two explosions. They still happen at the same time. And that's also very important to know. There is no half tick in between the two of these. It's just the order they get calculated, even though they happen at the same time. This is also a very important concept, and you want to keep this in mind for later tutorials. Now let's get into signal length. As you can see here, this will output a signal of one tick, and obviously the second lamp will take longer to activate since we have a 4-tick repeater here. But what you will see is that the second lamp will also stay on longer. The 4-tick repeater doesn't only add a 4-tick delay to turn on the signal, but also to turn off the signal. So any signal that is shorter than 4 ticks or 4 ticks and goes into a 4-tick repeater will always come out as 4 ticks. So the signal will stay on for 4 ticks. The same is true with any other repeater delay. So this way you can change the length of any signal that's shorter to a set length. Now, if you want a longer signal than this, for example, to keep a piston retracted for a long time to let sand fall into your sand comb, then you will need something called a pulse extender. The most simple pulse extender is right here. As you can see, we have this redstone line getting powered by this repeater here. And then every time it would run out of power, it keeps getting powered here from the side by another chain of repeaters, so it stays on as long as we want. We can fine-tune this delay by fine-tuning the amount of ticks we have on the side here, and this will stay on for however many ticks more. Then we also have newer, more compact designs using comparators. As you can see, after the button turns off, this stays turned on for a while and slowly ticks down. The length that you actually get out of this, since the signal strength ticks down, depends on where you take your signal from, as well as where you put the signal in. So as you can see, this here will disable later because it's closer to the extender. So if you want to get the most length out of this, you always want to have your next repeater right after. The same is true for the signal you feed in. If we feed in a weak signal, it will stay extended shorter than if we feed in a strong signal. You want to keep this in mind when using these designs. There's different ways you can fine-tune the length these provide. You can also combine one of these with one of these to get a precise length that you want. As you can see here, the more comparators you add, the longer the extender goes. You can also chain two smaller ones together to create something in between. You can also make these tileable and make them stack up vertically instead of horizontally, if that suits your cannon better. Here's the smallest design. You can also make something bigger like this. As you can see. Now, what if we want to do the opposite? What if we want to make a long signal shorter? For that, we'll use what you call a monostable circuit. The simplest one we have is the observer, which you can push with a piston, for example, to create a very short pulse, as you can see. Now, the reason we push this with a piston is that if you were to just run the signal straight into the observer, as you can see, it will activate once when powered on and once when powered off. By using the piston, we make sure that the observer can only power the next redstone when it is turning on. And once the signal turns off again, it does not power it again. Now, what we can also do is make it so this redstone only gets powered when the signal turns off. This is what we would call falling edge monostable circuit, and you can create a delay from a pulse length doing this, since the circuit will wait for the pulse to run out before it sends a signal. It's a very useful technique. We should definitely keep that in mind. Now, we can also use, for example, a sticky piston with a block as a monostable circuit. This is a very popular design. This design requires a repeater at least on one side of the block, doesn't matter which. And note that with this design, if you don't have a repeater after it, the signal will actually be shorter than 1 redstone tick, as you can see, and will not power, for example, a piston. So you always want to have a repeater at some point down the line after this, as you can see. Now, another thing that's very important is the way sticky pistons spit out blocks. If you lead a signal into a sticky piston, that's 1 redstone tick or shorter. As you can see, the sticky piston will not have time to retract the block again. It will just spit it out. And if you power it again, it will take the block back. Also a very important concept. Now, lastly, I want to talk about bud powering here. Now, the way bud powering works, I'm sure you've had issues with it in the past, or you've at least heard of it, is weird behavior with redstone in Minecraft. So the way you want to imagine this is you want to think of every redstone component, for example, a piston or a dispenser, as the bottom block of a door. Since the door was the first redstone component in Minecraft, lazily copy-pasted code made it so all of these other components kind of act like a door. Now, why is this important? As you can see, if you power the top block of a door, it still opens the entire door. Now, with a piston, if we imagine this is the bottom block of a door, obviously that doesn't happen. But the reason this doesn't happen is not that the piston is only 1 block tall. It's actually because this top part of the door updates the bottom part. And this piston doesn't actually have a top part to update it. So if we add anything up here that causes a block update, like for example another piston, this piston here will actually get powered. And it doesn't have to be the same block. For example, this works with a dispenser as well. And this is what we call bud powering. Also very important. This can be very useful for your wiring if you know how it works, but it can also destroy your wiring if you don't. So it's a very important concept. Now we can wire stuff like this, for example, with a diagonal redstone line, and we can actually update all of these with just 1 piston here, since this piston will update these, and this piston will update this one, and so on. So we can actually update all of these. We can also use stuff like a node block or a moving block to update. Something that's interesting is that a piston cannot only be budded in an unpowered state, but it can also be budded in a powered state. Something that I haven't really shown here is that once I provide this power, this piston is now budded. Even if this signal has already started, once I update it, it will still power on. And something that's very important here is once I update it, it will power on. But now I can power the signal off, and now it's budded, but in reverse. It will only power off once it's updated again. Also very useful, and can also break some of your designs. Now you know if I talk about dispensers getting budded and needing to be updated in certain designs, this is why. They get powered from somewhere, and they stay powered and won't fire every second shot because they are budded. And that's why you need to update some dispensers and certain wirings. Talking about wiring. A lot of common wiring techniques you will need to use in your cannon is obviously horizontal wiring and vertical wiring, going upwards or downwards. The simplest way of horizontal wiring obviously is a redstone line, and you should use this most of the time. But if you want to be a bit special, you can use something that's more performance efficient, like rails. These are a bit more performance efficient for the server. If you already used rails in your cannon anyways, you could also use this for wiring. Now, you can see, since rails aren't actually like redstone, you can use observers to link them up to create a line. Now, one thing worth mentioning is these can only, because of the observers, transport 1 tick pulses. And additionally, you will need to feed a 1 tick pulse in or a quick pulse. Otherwise, this is going to power twice, once when turning off, once when turning on. Then we also have slime blocks with redstone. Very versatile and nice way to wire things. It can go around corners. The only problem with it is it takes quite a big area because you can't place any blocks except for non-movable blocks like obsidian next to it. For example, if I place obsidian next to it, won't get moved. If I place this block next to it, if this has the max push limit, it will just break it. If it doesn't, it will actually move this block with it. So it needs a bit of extra room, more room than other kinds of wiring, but sometimes it's very useful. Now we talk about upwards wiring. The good old classic staircase, this in older versions was done with glowstone, but now you can also do it with glass, which is usually a lot cheaper. It's still a very good way to wire things, has no delay, and goes up 15 blocks. It's very nice. We also have slime blocks with redstone, as well as slime blocks with an observer at the end, which also acts as a monostable circuit for you. Then we have observer wiring, using this observer to power this block, to power this object to get scanned by the next observer. You can use normal redstone dust for this, rails, or the most performant option, as long as there's a block on top of it, a hopper, because these hoppers can also get powered. Usually I would just use redstone dust, but if you don't want it to power something, for example, say I have some redstone components behind this block here, and I don't want this hopper to get powered, I could also use something like a rail or a hopper here. Then we also have leaf wiring. An observer can actually detect if the state of a leaf changes, and the state of these leaves changes if I connect a log to them. Now, this also, you need to quick pulse, unless you want to get the 2 signals out at the end. And it's worth mentioning that for each leaf, there is a 1 game tick delay, or half a redstone tick of delay, which is another way you can create a game tick. We also have a similar thing with scaffolding. If you remove the block under a scaffolding, changing the length that the scaffolding is floating, like this, it will also do the same thing. This also has a 1 game tick delay per scaffolding. Very useful for wiring stuff like a efficient nuke. And yeah, you take the signal with the observer again. You want to quick pulse this, otherwise you will get 2 signals like here with the button. Then we go to downwards wiring. Most of the techniques from the upwards wiring can be used here again, like the leaves, the observers, slime. The staircase can't be used, and neither can the scaffolding. A staircase downwards would look something like this, very big and clunky. You usually don't want to do this. That's why you usually wire stuff from the bottom up in your cannon. You usually want to avoid wiring things downwards. But if you have to, pistons are your friends. Very good. Leaves also work very nice. Observer wiring, obviously, very good. And we have wall wiring. If you have a 3 wide wall like this, and then we change the state of the middle wall, for example, like this, that will update all the way down and send an update to this observer. Also a very interesting technique. I haven't seen this used a lot in cannons, since it adds an extra different block and it's kind of clunky, but maybe you will find a use for this one. Now finally, I want to talk about the way to wire commonly found patterns in cannons of dispensers. So you will commonly see walls like this in a cannon of dispensers. You will often need to build up to dispense a lot of TNT, and you will also often need to build towers like this, either a full tower like this, maybe only 3 sides or maybe only 2 sides, depending on how much you need and how you want to wire it. First, I'm going to go into ways to wire these. Now we have the good old classic repeater wiring. Works. Let me TNT through this real quick to show you this works. Now, good thing about this is you can also replace these with comparators. It still works the same. Then we also have the same thing, but without any repeaters. If you want to do this, you need to make sure all these blocks here are solid, so that it cancels out the signal, the redstone wire from connecting to diagonally up. And this also works the same, but has a bit shorter signal since there's no repeater. Generally, this is a bit annoying to build, and I prefer just using this one, but you can do as you please. Now we also have torch wiring, which uses these torches to power these dispensers and butt these here. These dispensers are butted, but they do get updated by the top dispensers. So this is a consistent way to wire as well. Very easy to build. It can be a bit annoying because the torches are obviously powered when you place them, but shouldn't be a problem. It's very easy to build. I really like this way of wiring in general. The only problem with it is you need a staircase on the side to get the signal up between these lines here. And you need to invert the signal at some point. But overall, very nice way to wire. And now lastly, we have the most common way nowadays to wire Canon, the observer wiring. And you do this by pushing up this piston here with this line of observers. An observer updates if it moves and sends a signal. The downsides to this is, because of the piston push limit, you can only go up 12 blocks at once. And it has a 2-tick delay, 1 tick for the piston, 1 tick for the observer. It's also a bit laggy on the server since moving blocks are always a bit laggy, but this is overall the cleanest way to wire. Another thing to note with this is you can also do this from the top down, just reverse the structure, and then you can power it from the top. You need to feed a quick pulse into this though, because otherwise the observers will not get sent down, they will get stuck up here. So overall, very clean way to wire. This is probably what you want to use most of the time, unless you have a specific reason you need repeaters or comparators for orders, or if you want to wire, for example, a web bus, you can also use torches like this on both sides. It's very clean. So these ways of wiring, definitely want to keep those in mind. Another important thing to note with these is these obviously need to be staircaseable blocks like glass or glowstone, but the bottom one always needs to be stone since the signal needs to go down here again. And that only works with solid blocks like stone, obsidian, cobblestone, whatever you're using. Then we get to these towers that we need to wire. This is commonly used for boosters, and we want to be able to wire this. So the way you can wire this is with a staircase like this. As you can see here at the bottom, we have it 4 wide. Here we have it 3. And here at the top, we have it 2. If it's too wide, we only use the staircase like this. 3. We also have these here, redstone, on the same height as the repeater goes in, with a piston under it, then a gap for 1, then the same thing again. The reason we have this is because otherwise these here would get butted, these dispensers. We make sure to update them like this, and nothing gets butted. If we have it 4 wide, we just add that back in the corner here. This is only required, this budding updater, if you have more than 3. So let's say it only went up to here, I wouldn't need it. As soon as you have more than 3 dispensers here, you will need it. Now this is very nice way to wire these. It's a bit clunky, but goes up 15 blocks and overall works well. Then you also have the observer wiring. Again, you can power 2 sides at the same time by placing the observers like this. Again, we need to quick pause this. And at the top, we do this. Have the redstone here, get powered from this observer, send it down. Again, drawback only goes 12 blocks high. You need to quick pulse it. It has a bit of delay. And you can also make this one 4 wide and 3 wide. Same as that. As you can see here, since it's only 3 high, we don't need to update anything. Since this is a bit special with the gaps, we need to have this one every 4 blocks. compared to this one. So there's a gap of 3 between the next signal here, while here there's a gap of 2. We can, for example, do the updating like this with node blocks. Also have sideways piston here. Something like that. I like using node blocks for this since it's simple. Node blocks in general are very nice. The reason I normally use pistons and not node blocks is so I don't add an additional block to my cannon that I didn't use before. Makes it easier to build, but if I have to update like this, I like to use node blocks. You always want this redstone to be on the level 1 above the observer that's pointing this way. So here's the observer, the redstone 1 above. Here's the observer, the redstone is 1 above. On the other side, obviously, that's this observer. And as you can see, all of these get powered. Now, I've shown you all its ways of wiring your cannon, and I hope this has helped you out. You will definitely need all of this knowledge in the next tutorials that I'm going to make, where I'm going to show you how to actually build parts of a cannon and how the parts work together. For now, I hope you liked this video. I will see you in the next tutorial. Yeah, leave a like and comment.